It is May 29th, 2025, the final show of May before we really kick into the fourth gear of drafting season. Hi, hello, and welcome to FFPC Insider Access live on the Better Sports Network. My name is Eric Balkman. You can connect with me on the X at Eric Balkman. You know me from the host of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, of course, the Fantasy Football Players Championship. We're going to go for 2 full hours tonight, hardcore, on a lot of ADP stuff, on a lot of stuff that maybe you hadn't been considering in your live drafts, or maybe stuff you should be considering as it comes up to your live drafts here. And I'm joined by one of the legends in the industry, a guy you know from RotoWire, a guy you know from SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, a guy you follow probably, and if you're not, you should be, at Jim Coventry NFL, the OG, Jim Coventry, joining me on the show tonight. Jim, hi, hello, and welcome. How are you?
Balky, always great to see you. We love talking football, and no better day than now.
So let me ask you this. I can't remember. I think the last time we spoke, were you close to retiring from the school business, or are you still in that business right now?
I've been out for 3 years.
3 years. So, okay, that's what it was. Yeah.
So it's good. So it's like now, as opposed to working 85, 90 hours a week between the two jobs, now I can spend like a good 70 on football.
Right. Yes. Is that what you do typically? You're about 70 hours on football. I mean, I don't know if it's 70 hours year round, right?
No.
Like, how does that go?
So 70 hours will be like really from draft season. Once we get into July, from there till the end of football season. But yeah, in the off season, it's close to 40 otherwise, but I do a ton of research. I have probably 900 pages of notes that are ready for the season that I've been working on, working on shows too. And then the more you speak about it, the more you master the content.
I can tell. I mean, I know I watched you on the Fantasy Points Fantasy Football Daily podcast earlier this week with Theo Greminger. You guys were awesome. I learned a lot from that. In fact, I think a lot of the stuff we're going to get into tonight, it's sort of like the piggyback of a lot of those questions or a lot of those topics that you guys talked about. For lack of a better term, we're the after show of that show, because I there's a lot of questions that I'm crafting tonight based on what you guys were talking about on there. For RotoWire, I know you and Anthony Cervino are doing a lot of podcasts, a lot of live shows, YouTube, X, and so on and so forth. Can you tell us a little bit about when those are airing, what to look out for, and what else you're doing for RotoWire? And then, of course, your schedule on SiriusXM.
Yeah, so with Anthony Cervino, we are on 5 days a week. We're on in the mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern. Obviously, it's only on the X, though. So it's on RotoWire X and RotoWire NFL. We retweet it from there. So that's where we retweet it at night with timestamps. So that's one thing you'll catch. I'll be on vacation the next week and a half. So Anthony's flying solo. There'll be a great show. Be a great show without me. I think everybody's excited about that one.
Not at all. I mean, Anthony's co-hosted this show with me before. He's awesome. But the two of you combined, you're like Batman and Robin. But you're both Batman, essentially, to borrow a line from 22 Jump Street.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And on the X every day, I do a stat of the day and a threat of the day. And I always find a stat that's really not obvious. It's something that kind of changes a little bit of a perception about a player. And then the SiriusXM schedule, that won't start until July. We're in baseball and basketball mode. So Nick Whalen and Jeff Erickson, carry the mail there. I'll come in on weekends starting in July, though. So that's it.
Nick Whalen, by the way, I believe Wisconsin royalty, if I'm remembering correctly. He is the man, and obviously him and Erickson are crushing it. And by the way, FFPC utilizing all the RotoWire news reports and everything on our website and all your leagues. So if you are in an FFPC league, you're going to get all the RotoWire updates. We're very excited about that this year as well. We're also excited to tell you that the FFPC main event early bird deadline is coming up midnight Pacific time this Saturday. This is our flagship event. It's a $1 million grand prize. It has a $6 million plus prize pool. The early bird deadline is midnight Pacific time, as I said, on Saturday. Here's what you get if you sign up by then. Number one, you're going to get $200 off your first team. Number two, you'll be entered into the drawing to be one of the Joes selected to compete in the annual Pros versus Joes Challenge. Jim, our mutual friend Darren Armani, puts this on every year. You're one of the pros that will be competing in this. So if you want to compete against guys like Jim, you can enter the main event. Make sure you're getting in on that. And then once you're in the drawing. I'll announce the drawing on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, I think coming up in the next couple of weeks. And you'll find out if you're in or not. And we have 7 leagues. So 84 teams, 42 Joes. And each one of those league winners will get a free entry into the 2026 FFPC main event. So all you have to do is sign up by this weekend, win your league, and boom, you get a free entry to compete for $1 million next year. It's really good. Slow drafts are already running right now at myffpc.com. The live main events start on Saturday as well. We have big gorilla drafts going on tonight, and we've had them going on for a while now, for the last couple of months. Big gorilla, another $1 million grand prize, $350 entry fee. Get in right now, because you're basically getting in 2 tournaments for the price of 1. You're getting in the big gorilla, and you're also getting in the early rampage tournament. A little bit over 70 drafts still remain, or 70 leagues still remain in the big in the early rampage tournaments. That's a $10,000 grand prize. So make sure you're getting in on that. The 7 Bananas promo, we've given away a ton of $125 FFPC best ball tournament teams and a couple of FFPC main event entries for people who are getting that 7 pick 2 times, 3 times in a row. You get it 5 times in a row, you're going to get a free jungle safari for 4, courtesy of the FFPC. How can you go wrong? FFPC best ball and Superflex best ball tournaments going on right now. Dynasty startups as well. myffpc.com. Shout out to our producer, Matt Deutsch. We are off and running here, Jim. Let's get into the stuff that's going around the NFL. The Giants. We'll start off in New York. Brian Daboll. Now, maybe I'm making too much of this, but when you're talking about a guy in Malik Nabers, who is the wide receiver 4 in the big gorilla right now at the 110, his ADP, according to Fantasy Mojo, fantasymojo.com, Darren Armani, who we always attribute all our ADP info on this show. He's dealing with a toe injury, and he's probably not going to compete for the rest of OTAs. I don't know what his status is going to be for training camp. The Giants are downplaying it, but to me, a team downplaying an injury means nothing to me anymore, because I've seen them downplay so many injuries that were serious. This has bothered him since college. And you say, well, Balky, look, he was great last year, and he was dealing with this toe. Am I wrong to be concerned about this? I just feel like this is weird. If this is an injury that he was dealing with in college, and here we are 2 years later, and he's still dealing with it, now he's missing OTAs, maybe I'm like a worry wart here, Jim. But if I'm sitting at the end of the first round, and I'm thinking about Malik Nabers, maybe I go the Nakua route. Maybe I go the Brian Thomas route. Or am I making a mistake if I do that? How do you fall in on this?
The fact that we're talking late May, we're 3.5 months until the opener. If it was a serious toe injury, there's a good chance it heals in 3.5 months. So the good news is there's no games. He's not going to play in preseason. We wouldn't worry about that. Not going to worry about him being able to hook up with Russell Wilson. So I don't think I'm worried right now. If it's bad enough and we hear the word surgery, well, now we got to frame it differently. And I know we're drafting best ball drafts now, and we have to think about and predict the future. This is too early. Okay. I will say I'm keeping Nabers at my wide receiver 4.
If this is happening, if we get to training camp and he's still missing time with the toe injury, do you bump him down to like a 3rd round pick? I mean, do you make him fall that far, or have you not even thought about that because you're like, look, Bulky, this is probably going to clear up by then?
Not being in the house, not being a doctor, but being a fantasy analyst, I want them to put him in bubble wrap.
Yeah.
Until the season starts.
Bravo.
Put him in bubble wrap. I don't need him now. I don't need him at all. I'm not. They'll condition. He'll condition on a bike. He'll do whatever he has to do to condition. He'll be conditioned for week 1. It may not be on the rigors of a field, but he'll be conditioned. So I don't have an issue with that. Again, I'm going to hold on this one. I'm not worried right now.
Let's go to another receiver that's going right up there this year. And I know this is a guy that you've been talking about a lot on your shows. Drake London is wide receiver 9 in the FFPC Big Gorilla, 206. This is the territory of right behind Nico Collins, yet right ahead of Ladd McConkey. The Falcons, no surprise, exercised the 5th-year option on him last month. This could be huge. I can't remember who was talking about this. Jim, it might have been you. And I don't want to put words because I listen to so many podcasts. But somebody was saying, oh, you know who it was? It was Joe Dolan from Fantasy Points. That's who was saying that. He said there's a chance that Drake London leads the NFL in targets this year. Okay. Kyle Pitts is already banged up. And like, listen, even if he was healthy, I don't know how much stock we're putting in him. Mooney is fine, but he's not like a T. Higgins type threat to Drake London. Drake London could be huge this year. Wide receiver 9 at the 206. How would you feel about that if you're drafting in the middle of the 2nd round of the FFPC Big Gorilla for $1 million?
I will draft Drake London any point from the turn of the 1st round and wherever I have him and he falls. I will put him over Nico Collins because Collins misses time every year. London's missed 1 game in 3 years. Brian Thomas, well, we could probably get in him later, but right now it's probably not the time to talk about the issues there. But I'll say this, Drake London. We saw this Falcons offense become very specifically geared toward the running back one, Bijan Robinson, and the wide receiver one, Drake London. You take those last 6 games, Balky, and you realize that London averaged 94 yards and 11.3 targets. It got better with Penix, though. Last 3 games, and I know one game's numbers were through the roof, but he averaged 7 catches, $117, and 2/3 of a touchdown. And it was 13 targets he averaged in those 3 games. It's a hyper-specific offense. People are getting a discount because London's season-long numbers only show 1,271 yards. That's not high-end wide receiver one territory. But if you take 6 games and an emerging star who just finished 3 years, I really believe he is going to be right there battling for that 3 spot with CeeDee Lamb and Malik Nabers.
So let me do this. I want to bring this up as long as we're talking Falcons here. You talked about how, and by the way, the stuff that you're putting out with the stat of the day and these threads, so good. It only takes a few minutes to work through them every day for us as consumers, and it's really prepping us better for drafts this season. And you can do all that by following Jim on Twitter at Jim Coventry NFL. Tyler Algier, one of your more recent ones that you were talking about, it's weird because we didn't have Arthur Smith there last year, right? And it's not like Algier was like in the distance. It's not like he was a nobody, right? Bijan Robinson was great, but I feel like we complained less about the usage of Bijan Robinson and the usage of Tyler Algier last year. What do you make for what you saw last year from Algier, and what do you make for how that is going to carry over to 2025 in regards to not only his volume, but Bijan Robinson's volume as well?
So I earlier mentioned how Bijan Robinson was like the clear number one, but that didn't mean that Tyler Algier was shut out. With Michael Penix, I fully expect this to be a run-based offense, but the receiving game is going to be Drake London, and Drake London. And that's why I project him so high. But Bijan Robinson was giving up carries to Algier, but it didn't matter because down the stretch, we saw Robinson getting 22 carries per game. But Algier went up from 7.7 carries to 8.7 carries in those last 4 to 6 games. And so we saw they are both going to be involved, both going to see enough work. Algier, of course, with that workload, he's barely a flex because he's not catching the ball. And actually, down the stretch, Bijan Robinson wasn't getting the receiving yardage, especially with Penix. That could be a little concern. But that said, heavy run game and a lot of Drake London. Mooney, his targets went from earlier in the season, it was a little over 7 a game. Last 6 games, he went down to 5. That was a pretty big drop. You're talking a good percentage there. And of course, Kyle Pitts, they're talking him up. Please, that ship has sailed.
Yeah. So, and like, I don't know. I wish he wouldn't have gotten hurt in regards to Pitts. Like he's dealing with what it was, a hamstring right now. Okay. So if and maybe he'll be fine by training camp and it's fine. But like now that he's hurt, Jim, and this is like, I'm ready to be hurt again. Given that Kyle Pitts in a tight end premium format, like the FFPC Big Gorilla, dealing with an injury that is sort of something we just found out about, and he's still at tight end 16 at the 1007. Am I wrong to just take a shot on him as my backup tight end? I know that there's upside there. I know the upside probably won't be captured, but again, the pass catcher number 2 position is wide open in Atlanta. And yeah, it could be Robinson and it could be Mooney again. But Kyle Pitts at the 1007 in tight end premium as tight end 16, I just feel like this is a horrible analogy, and I apologize. It's the pedophile with the candy in the van again, man. And like I'm jumping in that van at least one more year at that price. But again, if he's healthy for training camp or whatever, then his price probably shoots up, and then I'm kind of out on this. But Pitts is going on. We'll talk about Jake Ferguson later on. But it's like Kincaid, Jake Ferguson, Dallas Goedert. But then you get into the Freiermuth and the Likeleys of the world. And maybe the smart thing is just to let Pitts go, even at that price, and find somebody later. I don't know. It sounds like you're out on him.
For a lot of your audience that's been around the block a few times, the name Lee Evans, a wide receiver, will come to mind. Lee Evans, I think it was 1,000-yard season as a rookie. If it wasn't, it was 900, but it was beautiful. And it may have been a second year, but it was early. And people bet on him year after year. And every year, it was a massive disappointment. That's what Kyle Pitts is. He had 1,000 yards as a rookie, and we have been chasing. There's a new story, a new excuse every year. And whatever it comes out to, it doesn't work out. He had a few games stretched last year where it looked like it was going on, and then it evaporated. I just can't play this game. And, when you mentioned somebody like Freiermuth, and I know he's down at tight end 18 per Darren's ADP recently in the last 7 days. So he's ticked up one spot. But Freiermuth, remember, he has a great chance of being the number 2 in the offense. Last year, Freiermuth didn't pick it up until post-bye. He had 9.9 or more PPR, single PPR, not premium, but he had 9.9 or more PPR in 7 of his last 9 games with 2 spike games in there. The targets weren't through the roof, but he was a clear focal point. And now, DK Metcalf is going to get those play action shots that Arthur Smith likes to dial up. But that second receiver, they'll talk up Roman Wilson, the idea of Calvin Austin, whatever. Freiermuth is going to be the clear number 2. So I think you bet on him over Pitts. You'll have a floor. I think there's unrealized ceiling.
What do you make of, and I know this is late breaking, I saw this afternoon. Do you put any stock into this whole, hey, the Steelers are calling the Dolphins about potentially acquiring Jonnu Smith? Is that just noise? Because if it is, then I don't care. But if it's not, then maybe they're telling us kind of indirectly how they feel about Freiermuth, or maybe how just they feel about Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson.
I also think Arthur Smith, he coached Jonnu Smith in Tennessee. He coached him to a career year at the time in 2023 in Atlanta. And that was the last year he was there. And I want to say it was a 580-ish yards for Jonnu Smith. And then he had the huge year last year. Mm-hmm. So, but yes, he loves him. But I don't think the trade's going to happen. And here's why. First of all, I think that Miami's going to ask for a lot more than the Steelers are willing to give up. They're going to ask for too much, and that's where it's going to go awry, especially coming off that season. And the other problem is the more noise with Tyreek Hill that's an issue, and Tua has a weak arm, they're going to need Jonnu Smith. They couldn't get Waddle going last year. That offense was broken, and it was all about dump offs to Achane and dump offs to Jonnu Smith. But that's might be what they have. They can get Waddle going maybe. I'm worried about Tyreek Hill. He's not happy there. He's aging. He lost, I believe, a nano step, which that makes a difference. Because remember, Tua would underthrow him by 5 or 7 yards. He would run back, jump over 2 defenders, grab the ball, and run for another 30 yards. All of a sudden last year, I know the wrist was hurt, but he wasn't doing that. And that's what I mean, lose a nano step. He may not be Superman. He may be a superhero, but I think he may not be Superman. So they need Jonnu Smith. And Mike McDaniel is not going to want to sign off on that because his coaching career is hanging in the balance here.
So the other thing, and I brought this up even last year. I thought the whole idea with Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane was to keep Tagovailoa upright, was to keep him healthy. They didn't want him getting another concussion. What are the chances that, I got to think how I want to ask this question. What are the chances that Dolphins passing game gets modified to a more Waddle Hill friendly version of it, as opposed to what we saw in the second half of last year? In other words, Jim, should we be targeting Achane and Smith again? Or are Waddle and Hill the post-type sleepers that we want to look at?
I think Waddle is the post-type sleeper. I think internally they have to mentally be moving on from Tyreek Hill. They paid him. He has 2 more years on that extension, a $30 million extension he signed. But with all these red flags, behind the scenes, it's just a matter. If they go 2-5, good luck having Tyreek Hill in the locker room. My guess is it's going to be a real problem. So I think they're already kind of planning for life kind of after him. So I do think they're going to try to scheme up Waddle a little better. And I don't know why they didn't last year, but I will talk about Mike McDaniel. His first year, he was great. And then the second, they figured him out a little late and Tua got hurt. The second year, all right, he had that great counter punch. Remember those half field motions he was running with Tyreek Hill? It was so good, the rest of the league stole it. And they were using it, so they practiced against it. So the league figured that out. Well, since then, Mike McDaniel has not had another comeback. And that's my concern with coaches. If you don't have an answer to what the league does to you, McDaniel hasn't shown another counterpunch. And I don't know that he's going to figure one out at this point because if he had it, he would have used it. So that said, Waddle will get the ball more at the expense of Tyreek, I think. But it's going, like you said, it's going to have to be Achane and Smith as well, because as you correctly said, Tua has to get it out quickly.
Mm-hmm.
One quick word on Achane. 4 games Achane played without his quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, averaged 7.7 PPR points. Teams stacked the box. Backup quarterbacks were terrible. They couldn't get him going in the screen game. So if you're betting on Achane in your draft, you are betting on Tua staying healthy. And to me, that's always a risky proposition.
So regarding Devon Achane right now, he is going high, super high in drafts. Devon Achane right now, if you want to invest in him, you are picking him at the running back 7 at 205 right now. That is after Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey. It's right before Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, and Bucky Irving. The backup quarterback for Tua Tagovailoa, if anything were to go to pot this year, it is the incomparable Zach Wilson. Anytime, anywhere, any place, as long as it's not the Dolphins against another NFL team and in an NFL game. I don't feel great about that. So great point about Achane. Last thing I want to say about Tyreek Hill before we move on. Give me your percentage chance, because the Dolphins could save some cash if they trade him or release him after June 1st. And obviously they have a number 1 wide receiver in waiting to take over for him in Jalen Waddle. What are the chances that you think Tyreek Hill is still a Dolphin week 1 of the NFL season? Percentage chance here. Is it high? Is it low? Where would you fall in on this?
It's probably a 65% chance he's there. They really don't want to let him go because they know their best path is if they get him going, because obviously he's still Tyreek Hill, but there is a lot of noise. There are a lot of red flags. And at some point, it may be too much. But right now, I think the pros outweigh the cons. The wrist injury may be enough to sell them on, okay, well, maybe the injury was the problem. And I don't think that's all it was, because his yards after the catch, it was the lowest rate of his career. So it wasn't just his wrist. It was a lot more, but they may try to spin it that way. So I think 65% chance he stays there. What do you think on that one, Balky?
Yeah, I think 65 is low, in my opinion. I think it's closer to 80, that he's still with the team, maybe 80, 85. But maybe I have to lower it now that I hear a guy like you talk about this. Maybe it's more like 70 for me. I don't know. At this point, I just feel like I don't want to say Mike McDaniel's coaching for his job, but there were a lot of disappointed Dolphins fans, a lot of disappointed people with Dolphins ownership last year. And I think that more often than not, NFL coaches are coaching for their job. And if you are, why wouldn't you get it to your playmakers like Achane and Tyreek Hill as much as possible? Tyreek Hill right now is going as wide receiver 15 at the 307. He is going before Harrison, McLaurin, and Rashee Rice. He is going after T. Higgins, Smith and Jigba, and Garrett Wilson right now. So I have taken the plunge on Tyreek Hill in the early 3rd round in one of my Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship drafts, maybe 2. But I don't think, and honestly, Jim, I think the one league I know I took him in, I went receiver to start off my draft. So Tyreek Hill is my 3rd receiver. I'm fine with him at that point. And we'll see what happens. But investing in him, even in the mid-3rd round, I think it comes with a little bit of risk. But the track record speaks for itself. You just Sigmund Bloom posted this on X today about God, I can't remember who was talking. Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and he said, "You were warned. This is our official warning to you on Insider Access tonight from Jim Coventry and Eric Balkman. You were warned about Tyreek Hill for 2025." Let's move on. A younger receiver, a rookie, in fact, in Jacksonville, Travis Hunter. He is a wide receiver / corner. According to head coach Liam Cohen, he's been meeting with the defense as he's needed to. I don't know about you, Jim, and how your early best balls went. I was pretty thrilled that I got Hunter in close to double-digit rounds in several of my drafts early on when we didn't know if he was going to be an offensive player or a defensive player. Now it looks like he's going to be offense, and if we look at the Darren Armani fantasy mojo on him, Travis Hunter has moved up to wide receiver 26 at the 508. How do you feel about that, knowing that he is going to a situation with a player who was probably inarguably statistically a top 2 wide receiver last year as far as rookies go, and arguably the top wide receiver in the rookie class last year in Brian Thomas Jr. He gets the new head coach, and we'll talk about Tootin later and what they've done with the running game. How do you feel about Travis Hunter in the mid-fifth round of tight end premium leagues like the FFPC? I'm pretty excited about it, but I remain cautiously optimistic as I am with most rookies this time of year.
I'm very nervous about Travis Hunter because he still moves like a cornerback. Physicality-wise, in college, you can get away with that. He was more physically talented than his college opponents, didn't have to be polished to be able to win. He's not a polished receiver. He needs work to get there, and he's not really that close. I think it could take a full season for him to get there. He'll have flashes, I think, and I think that'll be great to see. And am I excited Liam Cohen's there? Certainly. He's done many great things with players. But they're also talking about playing Travis Hunter some on defense. And when you think about this, Balky, NFL players all wear down over the course of the season, but we don't notice it because they're all worn down equally. If you're going to have this player, Travis Hunter, playing some on defense, he is going to wear down faster than other people who are same conditioning level of professional athlete, but only playing one set of snaps. Even if it's an extra 10 snaps a game, it's going to pile up over the season. So I'm concerned about that. But again, the footwork isn't quite what a wide receiver needs to be. And do I really trust Trevor Lawrence? Yes, he's had bad coaching his entire career, but he's been in the league a while now. 25 touchdowns is his high watermark. He has been a very maddening quarterback, makes a lot of poor decisions beyond the coaching he's had. So I got to buy into the quarterback. I got to buy into Hunter figuring out the footwork and the polish. And I got to figure out the idea that Brian Thomas is going to get as many targets as he can handle. So that ADP on Hunter, I think, is aggressive.
It is aggressive. And I think you're making a lot of good points there. To piggyback on your Trevor Lawrence comment, I think about the division he's been in, and certainly Houston, Tennessee, and Indianapolis are far from world beaters when it comes to defensive play over the last 3 or 4 seasons. If Lawrence was the real deal, even regardless of coaching, should have put up more than 25 touchdowns in some year, and he didn't do it. So yeah, maybe Hunter, the love has come too far on him as he is going ahead now of Pickens, Sutton, Zay Flowers, and Jameson Williams. I don't know. That remains to be seen. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Speaking of Pickens and Williams, let's get into them. George Pickens is, quote, maturing, according to Brian Schottenheimer. He is the Cowboys head coach this year, was the OC the last couple of years there. If you look at George Pickens, he has ascended to wide receiver 27 at the end of the 5th round. Again, this is right ahead of Sutton and Flowers. It's right behind Devonta Smith and Travis Hunter. Pickens will probably be this. I should ask you this, and we'll get into Ferguson in a little bit. Maybe we should talk about Ferguson now, actually. But when you look at Pickens versus Ferguson for the number 2 target in Dallas, I think it's an important conversation because they don't have prime Ezekiel Elliott. They don't have prime DeMarco Murray. They don't have prime Emmitt Smith in the backfield. So the passing game is going to be that much more important. So when you look at Pickens versus Ferguson, yeah, maybe we're picking at nits a little bit to try to figure out who the number 2 receiver is or number 2 pass catcher is. But I think it's important to kind of flesh this out here. So Jim, who is it? And number 2, how significant are they going to be in fantasy this year on an offense where Dak Prescott could be lighting it up week after week after week?
If you're into voodoo, in odd numbered years, Dak Prescott has been the quarterback 2, the quarterback 3, and the quarterback 7 in the last 3 odd numbered years. The other years he was hurt, and he was actually bad and hurt. So it was a combination. Well, just hurt, but he was bad in those years. That's voodoo. But that said, you mentioned it correctly. They are not going to have a sustaining rushing attack. I don't trust either running back to sustain it. I don't trust the offensive line to be able to get consistent push against the defense. They're going to have to pass. I believe they'll use extra personnel, extra tight end, maybe a fullback, Hunter Lipke, to try to get extra bodies in to help Dak. I don't think the defense is going to be lights out. They'll have their moments against weak opponents. Like you said, they're going to throw the ball. And Dak Prescott's been there, and he's done that, and he can do it. So who's the number 2? I think it's a co-number 2. Pickens is going to have a specific role. He's going to be a perimeter guy, and he's going to win downfield, win in intermediate areas. But we know the history of Dak Prescott. And the history of Dak Prescott is he gets the ball to the tight ends as his check down. Mm-hmm. And Ferguson is really the most explosive tight end he's had. Dalton Schultz, in my mind, always been a catch and fall guy. He had an end of career Jason Witten. So obviously he wasn't moving well at that point. But we saw last year, 7 games, Ferguson played with Prescott. 3 of those games, at least 70 yards. That's going to be a hookup. And CeeDee Lamb is certainly going to have more space to operate because of Pickens. I think they all win. I think Pickens hits ADP, and I think Ferguson goes a bit over it. But they're both going to be involved. There are going to be games where one sees more than the other, but they both are going to be like kind of co-number twos, 2A, 2B.
CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 3, 106. George Pickens, I already said, wide receiver 27 at the 512. And then Ferguson, again, tight end premium. I think this is interesting. And it makes sense that he would go over. Tight end 15 at the 1005. I could see certain builds in the FFPC, Big Gorilla, the main event, best ball tournament or whatever, where you wait on tight end, you pound receivers, maybe you go robust running back and get a lot of running backs in the best ball format or whatever. Even if you wait on Ferguson being your number one tight end, I think that's a build that still could work out. Now, you probably got to pound a couple of tight ends in shortly thereafter with, whoever is going. I'll look that up right now. Whoever is going right after Jake Ferguson at that point. You could look at Kyle Pitts, Goddard. We mentioned likely Brenton Strange. I've been drafting him a lot this year as well. So then I think you could formulate something together. And if Ferguson is your number one tight end, you better be damn sure to be either loaded at running back, receiver, or both. Let's talk about Jameson Williams here. Dave Birkett, who covers the Lions for the Detroit Free Press, said he expects that the Lions are going to throw the ball downfield more under new offensive coordinator John Morton. Now, Jameson Williams has been a Whiskey Bill, as he has been known in a lot of circles here over the course of his career, has been rising. He is not the biggest breakout receiver, I would say, in the NFC North. I think that still belongs to Rome Odunze, but we'll talk more about that. Jameson Williams has moved up wide receiver 30 at the 604. Jim, that's behind Pickens, Sutton, and Flowers. It's right ahead of Godwin and Waddle. Jameson Williams at wide receiver 30 at the 604, a player that I didn't even realize until after the season that dude got over 1,000 yards receiving this past year. And maybe that's a testament to what Ben Johnson put together with St. Brown and Laporta and Williams and Gibbs and Montgomery and Goff, quite frankly. I feel we just talked about how rich it was for the price of Travis Hunter. I feel we're getting towards the Jameson Williams ceiling here too, when you're talking about all those different pass catchers and all the different talented skill position players Detroit has. I guess I'm fine with them here and there, but man, I don't know if I'm loading up on Jameson Williams anymore, especially considering this dude might not be long for the team after they traded all those third-round picks to get Isaac Tisla.
I tell you, Balky, you brought up some points. Did Williams do it because of the coaching? Did he do it because he broke out? Or did he do it because there were 18 injuries season ending on defense?
Yeah, that's another good point. Yes.
This team, the Lions, they figured out their identity last year in week 3. Their identity was, we're going to have a top 10 defense. We are going to run the ball down your throats. And Jared Goff is not throwing more than 25 passes a game. And they used that script from weeks 3 through week 7. Do you know how many targets Jameson Williams averaged in those 4 games?
Probably not a lot.
2. This is who they are this year. I think the beat writer can talk all he wants. This team is going to run. That defense will be healthy to start the year. They're not getting 18 injuries again. If you have 3 season enders on defense, that is a big number. I always watch these things like how amount of injuries. 2 is a solid number. That's it. They'll be healthier. Those corners they drafted last year, they have experience now. This team will run all day. Goff is not throwing more than 25 passes. Remember, Sean McVay ran Goff out of town. Well, Ben Johnson figured out Goff, made the perfect usage of him, manipulated everything to his wheelhouse. Do you really think a coach is going to move up the ranks, John Morton, and say, oh, yeah, same thing. We're going to roll back? No, it's how everything was set up. Plays were set up. It's not going to happen. And they're going to learn really quick. Run. So I'm on Ross St. Brown to be fine. Speaking of Laporta only averaged 2.8 targets through week 7. Same thing. The defense and the running game and St. Brown. He's another one that's going to take a massive hit. I'm not touching Jameson Williams because he's not going to get targets. And I'm not touching Laporta because he's being drafted as if he's that second half and that rookie year guy.
It's interesting with Laporta too. I didn't even realize this till you were talking about him. He's tight end 4 in FFPC leagues right now. He's going at the end of the 4th round. Basically, if you don't want, if you don't have a tight end and you don't get George Kittle in the early 3rd, then you can wait till the end of the 4th to take Laporta, or you could wait to the early 6th to take Hawkinson. You could wait till that Honeywell at the end of the 6th round with Kelsey, Janu Smith, Evan Engram. They're all available there. Again, this is almost 2 full rounds after Laporta if you still want to get a guy. And maybe the strategy is, and Jim, I should ask how you fall in on this. I've heard a lot of pundits out there this year say, if you don't get one of the top 3 guys, just wait until, like 9, 10 of the tight ends are off the board and then hit, 2 of them in the next, 6 picks or something. Is that something that you would subscribe to as far as strategy goes?
It has to be. I just talked about the Laporta conundrum where they're going to play defense and run. Well, TJ Hawkinson, they loaded up the interior line. They brought in Jordan Mason. They have a quarterback who's never played an NFL game, and they have an aggressive defense, and they've added pieces. This is another team. The Vikings want to run the ball. And so Hawkinson, he's going to be splitting the leftovers from Jefferson with Addison, assuming Addison's around due to legal situations. And then Travis Kelce, he's getting steamed up. But seriously, they've got all their receivers healthy now, and he's been in sharp decline. Jonnu Smith, again, you could consider him, but if Hill and Waddle get involved, that could dry up. And Evan Engram, everybody loves him, but they got a running game, and they've got a defense. Sean Payton, that's what he wants. So how many targets are going to be there? So you're right. All these guys after the top 3, you're taking chances. So just wait.
Are you betting, and this isn't on the rundown, but I'll just ask you, are you betting on an RJ Harvey failure if you were investing in Evan Engram this year, or are those things not complementary?
I think you have to. We saw Marvin Mims see his usage increase from week 10 or 11 on. We saw him getting at least 44 yards in the majority of his games, 6 touchdowns down the stretch. It wasn't a ton of targets. They weaponized him, bubble screens and deep shots. Cortland Sutton took a hit on some targets. So Mims is going to be involved. And Peyton had been promising that for 2 years till he finally did it. And then you bring Ingram into the mix. Well, we're expecting Bo Nix to throw a ton. But remember, Denver's defense was good as it was. They had Hufanga at safety. They had Drake Greenlaw at linebacker, Jahdae Barron at cornerback in the first round. Oh, my goodness. This could be the best defense. I don't think I'm going on a limb here. The best defense in the league. And Sean Payton crafts a great running game. He doesn't need the running back to be elite. He can make a good running back very good. That offensive line, they built that line. It's a good line. I don't think they're going to have to throw a lot at all. There'll be games they do. They'll be playing a couple elite teams here and there. Most of their schedule, they're going to be leading games. And Harvey's going to be fine. It's going to be volume because you don't trust Jaleel McLaughlin. So inefficient last year. Audric Estime, and he'll get some – Audric Estime get some grinder carries because they'll just want to keep Harvey from breaking down. But those will be like very purposeless carries. They'll be between the 20s. It'll be, 8 a game. Harvey's in a great spot here.
Okay. I've been drafting Harvey, especially my rookie drafts, and a few of my best ball leagues, and I feel pretty solid about him. So it's good to hear that reinforcement. I want to move on to one of the more bankable offenses in the AFC to one of the least bankable offenses in the NFC in New Orleans. Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed dealing with concussions and a knee injury, respectively, according to Matthew Paris, who works for the New Orleans Times-Picayune, covers the Saints for them. He says both of those players look, quote, completely recovered after watching OTAs. Now, this is OTAs. I don't know how much we can determine from that. But Olave has fallen to wide receiver 34 at the 6'10". Rashid Shaheed has fallen to wide receiver 60 at the 1302 right now. As far as quarterbacks go, in the big gorilla right now, where you only have to start one of them, nobody's drafting a New Orleans quarterback at all. So I think that comes into play. But, Jim, when we're talking about these Saints receivers, knowing what they did or maybe didn't do in the draft and free agency, and I know you're talking about this with Theo, it seems like you're more pro Olave and more negative on Shaheed. Is that right?
So, yes, the deal with Shaheed is, remember, he had a 73-yard, 96-yard, and an 86-yard game. He did them all on 4 or fewer catches. that offense with Clint Kubiak was very well designed. It was rollouts. It was boot action. It got Derek Carr out of pressure. He did make a couple good pressure throws to Shaheed. I'll give him credit for that, but they largely got Carr out of the pocket, and Carr can throw deep. So obviously he's not there anymore. He's retired, but that helped Shaheed realize his vast potential. I don't think either of those quarterbacks, obviously a new coach this year, it's not going to be that same level that Clint Kubiak did. So I don't think Shaheed will be maximized in the downfield game that really gives him those spike weeks and big yards on limited catches. Olave, on the other hand, and I get heated about this, both concussions that Olave had last year, they were both Derek Carr's fault. Both of those throws were medicine balls. Carr led him right into the hit. And that was like Jimmy Garoppolo stuff, like getting George Kittle hurt back in the day. And I get like heated when I see that. Well, Derek Carr being gone. And matter of fact, Carr would be like hissing at Olave on the sideline. And then he would freeze Olave out on purpose in games. And I'd see that. Good riddance. Good riddance. Any quarterback who comes in, and Tyler Shuck, look, he can probably make enough throws. They're going to throw for 2,500 yards. It's 2,700 yards. That they're going to do that. I'm not saying they're throwing for 3,500. They're throwing for something. Chris Olave, in his career, whenever he gets 6 targets in almost every game over his career, it's always 80-plus yards. Again, there's a couple exceptions. It's very few. Olave is a superstar, but he has had a bad quarterback that, like I said, gets him hurt. So I think we're going to bet against the concussions. You can never guess if they're going to happen or not. And I am buying Chris Olave at that ADP. Because look, if it weren't for the concussions, you'd be drafting him at wide receiver, well, probably 18 because of the quarterback. It would have been wide receiver 14 if you had a quarterback, because that's what it was in the past. Wide receiver 34, yeah, all day long. I'm going to take my chance he doesn't get concussed.
Yeah, and I think when you could get him as your number 4 receiver there potentially, or even if it's your number 3, if you maybe target running backs or tight ends early. I spent most of my rookie draft time trying to trade for Chris Olave in a lot of my dynasty leagues, and no surprise, a lot of the players they just were not willing to give him up at a discount. And even when I was trying to pay 100 cents on the dollar, they're still like, we'll see what happens. We're going to see what happens with New Orleans this year. The quarterback depth chart, I'm looking at our lads right now. Tyler Shook, Spencer Rattler, Jake Haener, and then something called a Hunter Deckers, who is number 4 on the Iowa Western Community College alumni train, joining the New Orleans Saints this year. It's not great, Bob, with New Orleans there, but I think you make a strong case for Olave here for sure. A quarterback situation that is significantly better than New Orleans is Chicago. Pro Football Talk had a story yesterday that Ben Johnson said he's been extremely impressed, quote unquote, with Rome Odunze. And Brad Biggs, who covers the Bears for the Chicago Tribune, believes that the Bears offense is going to use screen passes frequently in 2025. Jim, am I wrong in thinking, like, didn't they use a lot of screen passes frequently last year as well?
They did. And it was really why DJ Moore gets you 98 catches and he doesn't hit 1,000 yards. Right. The problem was, there were 2 things. The interior offensive line was not just bad, they were poorly coached. Anytime a team sent a disguise or what I call a simulated pressure, those rushers were in the backfield. Always snapping the ball. Caleb Williams never had a chance. And then the other point was the opposing defenses knew this was going to happen. So they just brought everybody down. Well, now those bubble screens, they're supposed to be designed into space. There is no space because you got 8 defenders down and there's no space. Now, DJ Moore still went 85th percentile after the catch, which God bless him for that, because that was a miracle. But that said, if you're going to run screen passes, but it's a well-designed offense, there's blocking set up from not just the offensive line, but other receivers, tight ends, you can make that work. It's going to be completely different. There was no imagination to that screen game last year. So I think that's overblown as to how much they'll use it. I think it'll definitely be part of the plan, but I also think Ben Johnson's a pretty smart guy. And I think he's going to challenge teams downfield as well. And then when he gets the defense in that too high shell, now you come in and you use some quick hitting screens and get some easy yardage. You always keep the defense off balance. So I think I would take that comment and frame it, it's part of the menu, and it'll be a good menu.
Odunze, to reference the Pro Football Talk report, is going right now in between Moore and Burden. Moore 410, Odunze 706, Burden 1012. So you're looking at roughly about 3 rounds between these guys. Wide receiver 22, wide receiver 37, wide receiver 52. Jim, do you have a favorite among those? I don't think you're a Burden guy, are you?
I'm not, because we go back to last year, Ben Johnson.
Oh, the sets. They rarely had a third wide receiver on the field, right?
Yeah, it was 55% of the time. That's criminally low. You need at least 60 to 65% to be on the field as a third receiver to really have a chance. He's not going to get the snaps. It's just that simple. Brock Wright played 49% of the snaps. Well, the second tight end in Chicago is Cole Kmet. And Cole Kmet, is legitimately could be weaponized. You could run disguises with your 2 tight ends, and both of your tight ends could be actually moved out as weapons. So it really adds more to the arsenal. So I don't think Luther Burden's going to see the requisite snaps to make a consistent difference. As in these 2 receivers, look, DJ Moore, 2 years ago at Justin Fields, he's a wide receiver 6. Last year in a train wreck, he was a wide receiver 14. He's getting drafted as a wide receiver 20. What doesn't work here? I mean, he is a superstar, and he's always been a superstar, but he's had horrible quarterback play his whole career. This year could be different, and I expect it will be. I think Rome Odunze is going to finish in the top 12, and that's not making a big statement, because that's what he's been the last 2 years. It's going to be better. Hold on.
He's going to finish in the top 12 of receivers?
DJ Moore.
No, hold on. DJ Moore is going to finish in the top 12 receivers.
Yeah, he was number 6 2 years ago. He was 14 last year.
So that's what Moore is going to do that again this year.
Oh, of course. And it's not going to be close.
Right.
Minimum of 1,200 yards. Minimum.
Okay.
Minimum. Yeah. So he is, and that's what he's always been, right? I mean, in the train wreck seasons, he's been that player, but nobody's valuing him that way. And I can't get the disconnect. Rome Odunze, look, he's the guy that we thought he would be last year. We drafted him. We were excited about him. But I told people, last year, Shane Waldron ran the offense to start the year. And I told people he was in Seattle the year prior. And Jackson Smith-Njigba was the frozen out man with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. And I go, the same thing last year would happen in Chicago. It's going to be Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and it's going to be a little less in snaps for Odunze, situational stuff. And that's exactly, and then they switched to Thomas Moore. It didn't change. A little more targeting late. But Odunze now has a chance. Clear number 2. Again, Ben Johnson is going to be able to use him. I think it's going to be one where DJ Moore is going to see more short and intermediate. And I think Odunze is going to see more intermediate and downfield, even though Moore can win downfield. I think they're going to have 2 very good roles. And I think they both beat ADP. I think this Bears offense is one you want to buy into.
I'm 100% into you on that for sure. I've been buying Caleb Williams. I've been drafting Bears for sure. I feel like this is their, because and nobody talks about this. Think about what they did the offensive line, investing, via trades, free agency, the draft. Like they've done a lot, and I think that was their biggest Achilles heel last year. I think you improve that. Everybody with the skill position players looks a lot better in 2024 than they did. Let me ask you this final point about Burden. Knowing that Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles drafted a tight end with the 10th overall pick of the draft, and knowing that they have, or at least Ben Johnson has no allegiance to Odunze, no allegiance to DJ Moore, and then they went ahead and used their 2nd round pick on Luther Burden. I know you're bearish on Burden for 2025. What about for Dynasty? Are you more bullish on him being a player like, hey, you suffer through the 2025s, or not suffer through, you watch him not attain expectations in 2025, and then you go ahead and grab him because 2026 is going to be a big Burden year?
So Rome Odunze will be in the 2nd year of his 4-year, but they can pick up his option. And so he'll be here a while. DJ Moore had signed that contract in July of last year. It was a 4-year deal. So I guess this would be year 2 of it. So he has 2 more years beyond that. It's a real log jam. That's the problem. And if the Bears are beginning to realize success, are they really going to trade away DJ Moore if they are? Because I don't think he's going to be part of the problem. He'll be part of the solution. And so Burden is just in a tough spot. And it's rough because we talked about this earlier. The usage in personnel, this is a perfect 2 tight end team. Their roster is perfect for it. So that's my concern. I just don't think, unless something crazy happens and Odunze's a surprise bust. We know DJ Moore is not going to be a bust because he hasn't been.
Right. I that's a good point. I forgot about the contract extension. I should remember that because we saw it on Hard Knocks, right, when they extended DJ Moore. Ricky Pearsall was in the news this afternoon. Matt Barrows, who covers the 49ers for The Athletic, said that Pearsall tweaked his hamstring and he is unlikely to practice at least in full until training camp later on in July. If you go back to his rookie season, yeah, he got shot, but remember that in training camp, he hurt his hamstring in mid-July then. 2 weeks on the NFI list, and then he gets shot, and he really couldn't be a fantasy force, or at least the version of a fantasy force that he was at the end of the season. Brandon Ayuk is recovering from the torn ACL. Deebo Samuel, yeah, he's in Washington, but the thing I noticed this week when I was looking at the ADP on FantasyMojo.com for FFPC leagues, Jawan Jennings is now ahead of Pearsall. Jawan Jennings is wide receiver 38 at 709. Ricky Pearsall's at the 802. I'm still team Pearsall here, Jim. He's a first-round pick, got the draft pedigree. I'm a big believer in him. Jennings was good in spurts last year, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong to put so much stock in the draft pedigree here. But when it comes down to brass tacks here, by and large, I'm going to take Pearsall over Jennings, even though the ADP is razor thin. I'm going to take him over Jennings. How do you feel about the situation?
What's tough to rectify is when Ayuk is healthy, and I don't know if that's week 1 or week 6. I'm not quite sure where that falls. But if he's healthy, they're going to run a lot of 2 receiver sets. And there's one thing I'll tell you about Jawan Jennings. He is a butt kicker as a blocker. He is insane for what he does. He helps that team in so many ways that will never show up in a box score. And what I thought was also interesting, Balky, was between Jennings and Pearsall last year, they both played a similar ratio of snaps outside and in the slot. So it's not like, oh, well, Pearsall's automatically the slot. I thought he would be, but that wasn't the case. They used him outside at the same rate. There were a different number of snaps, obviously, because Pearsall missed so many games, but it was equal. So I imagine it's going to be tough because on those 2 receiver sets, I think they rotate. I think they're going to cannibalize each other to a degree because there's times you want Jennings on the field, red zone for sure, big body, but blocking too, like I said. And then you want to get McCaffrey going. Their whole thing is we're going to give McCaffrey all the work he can get. Who's the part of the solution? That's Jawan Jennings because he's going to take out a linebacker. So I'm very nervous about this receiving group beyond if Ayuk is healthy because Ayuk's going to get his. But I think it's going to be trade on and off. And if you look at Pearsall last year, Balky, it was weird. The last 2 games, yeah, he averaged 7 catches for $105. Now, remember, one of those games, backup quarterback, they had starters out, but we had him go. Pearsall had a nice little stretch for a while, and then he was invisible for 5 weeks, and then he had the 2 big weeks at the end. It was really sporadic. But again, I wonder if it's going to be game script and game flow and how they go about it. That's my concern. So I think both will have good weeks. I just have a really hard time thinking that week to week, I'm going to be confident trusting him in my lineups.
So what about this? And if let's do a 4-part multiple choice answer here. Which one of these options are you most likely to do in Jim Coventry drafts this year in the FFPC? Are you most likely to do Jawan Jennings at the 709, Ricky Pearsall at the 802, Brandon Ayuk at the 908, or no Niners receiver at all?
I would probably go with Ayuk, even if he didn't turn it up until week 5 or so. And that's well in the cards. But I know Brandon Ayuk can be an 1,200 yard receiver. I know he can do that. And I know with no Deebo Samuel, he'll be on the field. Full time isn't 80%. That's about the going rate, but he'll be out there that much. And without Deebo, they're going to turn to him, and a lot's going to be schemed up to him. And they're going to need him to take the top off of defenses too, a little more than usual, because again, you want to get more space for McCaffrey. And I think that's the piece of the puzzle we're missing too, because last year when the receivers got involved and did all this, it was with no McCaffrey. But if the team has it their way, it's leftovers after Kittle, who has 90 targets. Ayuk, when healthy, he'll get his prorated 110 targets, 120. And after that, I think the McCaffrey show is going to really limit everybody else. So it'd be Ayuk at the 9. Give me Ayuk there, because at least I think I'm going to have that production. They're going to need him.
Yeah, and they paid him. That's another thing, the aspect to consider as well. I'll freely admit this. I did not realize he was going at almost double-digit round ADP right now for Ayuk. So that's something to be thinking about here going forward. I want to take a quick break. We've gone hard here for the first 54 minutes of the program. When we come back, let's talk about wide receiver targets and fades. We're going to lead things off with Stefon Diggs. I want to talk about the top 2 receivers in Indianapolis catching balls from Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones or someone. We don't know. Perhaps Peyton Manning, Johnny Unitas. Maybe they're going to come back. I have no idea. FFPC main event early bird deadline, midnight Pacific time on Saturday. Make sure you're getting in on that. Save $200 off your first team, and you'll be entered in the FFPC Pros versus Joe's drawing, and you'll be eligible to win $1 million grand prize and a $6 million plus prize pool. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. Jim Coventry NFL is where to follow Jim Coventry on the X. He's from RotoWire, SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. I'm Eric Balkman. This is Insider Access on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Andrew Cooper here, Fantasy Alarm. And boy, do I have great news for you. It's that time of year. The FFPC main event is open. The flagship contest, in my opinion, the biggest, number one contest in all of fantasy football. It's not just about the prizes. You can win $1 million, but if you win a contest like this, you are gold-plated, gold-stamped in this community. That puts respect on your name when you go in there with the big dogs and you win a tournament like this. So get set up with my FFPC now. When you use promo code ALARM, they'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more if you've never drafted there before, and you can get in there with the big dogs. If you really want, you can actually go to Vegas and draft at the Paris Casino live in these contests. You don't have to do that, though. You can draft online. They have 6-hour, 2-hour, and 60-second clocks, depending on what you're feeling. And if you sign up now before May 31st, my birthday, you get a discount. You can get $200 off your first team, and every team subsequent after that, $600 off. You're going to want to draft early and often these to give yourself the best possible shot at winning. And let me tell you, when you go over to your social media bio and you throw FFPC main event champion in there, people start thinking about you at a different way. You are now an absolute champion and legend in this community if you win the FFPC main event. Open now over at myffpc.com.
Thank you, Coop. We appreciate that for sure. As I want to remind everybody, the FFPC main event waits for no man. The slow drafts have already been going off for the last couple of weeks. The live drafts kick off on Coop's birthday on Saturday, May 31st. $1 million grand prize, $6 million plus prize pool. Remember, if you register by midnight Pacific time on Saturday night, you're going to get $200 off your first team. You're going to be entered in the FFPC Pros versus Joe's drawing, where you can be a Joe to be selected to compete against 42 industry pros, including but not limited to Jim Coventry from RotoWire and SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. You'll have the ability to win a 2026 free FFPC main event entry. Sign up now at myffpc.com. Jim, we did not get a chance in that first segment because it was going so nice to talk about Stefon Diggs, who didn't show up for OTAs. That's fine. I get it. He's 31 years old. He's coming off an injury. I don't know what he would have done at OTAs, but he was on a yacht with a bunch of models. He's dating Cardi B. There was some sort of pink substance on the boat. I don't know what that is. I'm too old to know what that is anymore. You're not teaching anymore, so the kids aren't telling you what the pig substance is. We have no idea. So there's a lot to unpack here. Chad Graff, who covers the Patriots for The Athletic, says that he could, quote, reasonably be ready by week 4 of the NFL season. Now, Diggs, if we look at his ADP right now in the FFPC Big Gorilla, courtesy of fantasymojo.com, he's fallen to wide receiver 41. He's going in the mid-8th round at the 805 right now. Now, to give context sake on this, if you want to draft Stefon Diggs, you'll be drafting him amongst receivers like Deebo Samuel and Ricky Pearsall, who are going right in front of him, Khalil Shakir and Jacoby Myers right after him. I have to, Bob Harris from Football Guys always says that, separate the name from the numbers, and it's difficult to do when I see those names around Stefon Diggs. Man, if I can get Stefon Diggs as my number 4 wide receiver this year, I really like it. But Jim, should I like that?
I do worry, Balky. You have a player who'll be 32 in November. And when you look at the ages of receivers throughout the league, very few receivers are playing at a good level at that age. Devontae Adams still playing at a high level, but you notice DeAndre Hopkins kind of toast, and players, Julio Jones was kind of toast around that age, and it just happens year after year. Diggs is now coming off a mid-season ACL, and now he's going to a new team. Camp might not be a big deal to him, but chemistry with his new quarterback, you got to know where he's going to be in and out of the breaks, and that they're going to miss a lot there. Pace-wise, last year, Diggs was on pace for 1,000 yards. 5 of his games were between 69 and 94 yards, but he was playing with C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins. Well, some of the time he got hurt, so he was out there a little bit of the time. Some Tank Dell out there. But coming back from this injury, they already say he's going to be slot. He's going to be mostly a slot player, which is fine. That's kind of, Larry Fitzgerald late in his career had to move into the slot, and he extended it out. I just think there's too many red flags. And if the team gets off to a slow start, is Diggs a front runner? Because I think he might be. And if Diggs isn't happy, I don't think anybody's happy. And it doesn't take much to make him unhappy. Remember, Minnesota, he had to go from there because he wasn't happy. And then all of a sudden he wasn't happy in Buffalo. Why is he going to be happy in New England?
So Kyle Williams was a 3rd-round pick by the Patriots this year. Does that at all factor into your drafting Diggs or not drafting Diggs because of the draft capital that the Patriots sunk into him, or does that not factor in?
I don't think it factors in. I just really think it's a recovery from the ACL, and I was glad that they mentioned today that it might be week 4, because I was thinking all along, I'm thinking mid-season, and week 4 is still.
Okay, but okay, you say that, but I just, and like Jim, you know this better than me, but like I feel like what I'm hearing in summer, like I'm always tacking on extra weeks onto that. I said when Christian Watson tore his ACL in week 18 last year against the Bears, my immediate reaction, and I've wavered a little bit on this, but I feel like I still believe it. I don't think he plays in 2025.
Done.
I don't think he plays at all, especially after drafting Golden and drafting Savion Williams. This is the whole who was the running Jonathan Brooks tears his ACL last year, and what do the Panthers do? They put him on PUP or whatever it was, but because of when they put him on PUP, it knocks him out for the whole season. And that's basically telling him, like, look, don't worry about 2025. Get healthy for 2026. Don't even think about trying to get on the field, because you can't, because now we've made it. So now you have to rehab for 2026. Now, Watson, it's a little bit different because he's in a contract year. And I'm in Northeast Wisconsin here. I have a few sources. I shouldn't say I have a few sources. I have a few sources who have sources. So I'm getting this third hand. But they're telling me, and they've told me this off air for people who cover the Packers who are in that Watson definitely wants to be back in Green Bay. He doesn't want to go anywhere else. Now, if he does want to be back, it's going to be a weird contract situation because he may not play at all this year. And then it's like, what do? Do you sign a prove-it contract with Green Bay, or do you go somewhere else, especially with Savion Williams and Matthew Golden coming into the fold here? Getting it back to Stefon Diggs. I think it behooves him to get on the field. I think he wants to get on the field. He wants to show that, hey, I can show out with a young quarterback. You can pay me, and I'll be good for at least 3 more years or whatever. Will that happen? I don't know. But you're right. The risks of a 32-year-old wide receiver coming off an ACL injury, I think you know what you're getting into when it comes to be, whatever I said that the ADP was at wide receiver 41 in the 8th round. Okay.
One last thing, Balky. I always say this to my audiences. Age and injury recovery are very much related. It was why I was out on Cooper Kupp last year before I started 2 years ago. Age, when you get to your 30s, those injuries that you came back from in 3 weeks are now 5 and 6 weeks. It's just, you see it all the time, and it's not universal, but it's close. And Diggs coming back, like you said, from an ACL. All right, well, they're thinking week 4, but is it really week 8 or week 9? And now if you're investing him in wide receiver 41, can you really stomach that? Because you're going to go through half of the bye weeks.
I think
maybe not have him.
That's what I've done before, where I brought this up on the show before. Scott White, who is a CBS Fantasy Sports baseball analyst, has said this, and I think it plays in football too. He doesn't like to draft injured players coming into the season because he knows his players are going to get injured. So why is he compounding that aspect, right? And so for me, the whole thing is like, I have drafted players like that where I feel like they're coming back when they should be coming back, late September, early October. And then all of a sudden, oh, it's a setback. Oh, we're taking it easy. And we'll see what happens. And all of a sudden it's like early November and this guy still hasn't played. And then by the time he gets back, he's got to get into game shape and he's behind everybody else. And then it's like, maybe you can use him for a couple weeks in December. Was that worth the 8th round pick in May? Probably not. So
No.
I usually will not throw caution to the wind. I am going to go with Khalil Shakir. I'm going to go with Jacoby Myers, the healthy guys coming into the season. That's where I stand on that. Let's move to Indianapolis here. Nate Atkins, who covers the Colts for the Indy Star, has reported yesterday that Josh Downs is dealing with a soft tissue injury. He did not participate in Wednesday's practice. Now, my co-host for the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour on Friday nights, Farrell Elliott, is a massive and perhaps maybe the president of the Michael Pittman fan club. He loves Michael Pittman. And to his point, I would say Pittman put up really, really borderline elite numbers his first few years in the league before he was dealing with a broken back in 2024, which allowed Josh Downs to come up to get very similar numbers to what Pittman got in limited time in 2024. What's interesting, Jim, this year, these guys are basically going back to back. Downs is wide receiver 49, Pittman's at wide receiver 51, 1007 and 1008 right now. Now, I know it's Anthony Richardson or perhaps Daniel Jones or perhaps God knows who throwing him the ball here this year. Where do you stand on drafting those two Colts receivers at the end of the 10th round, the mid to late 10th round? Do you like one better than the other? Are you staying away from both of them? Quite frankly, I don't know how I want to handle this yet. How do you feel like you should handle it?
I think we have learned one thing about Josh Downs in 2 seasons. The young man's quarterback proof. He has played with terrible quarterbacks as a rookie. Plays all 17 games. Really impressive. 771 yards, 98 targets. Last year, he missed 3 games, and he still did better. 803 yards, 3 less games, 5 touchdowns, 107 targets. So it wasn't like a crazy number, but it was a good number for 14 games, quite honestly. It's almost 7.5 targets a game. He can win from the slot. He can go vertical, and he is quarterback proof. So I will buy at that price because you're getting him just barely outside the wide receiver 4 fringe at the end of it. Pittman, on the other hand, look, I like Pittman as well. Pittman catches a lot of possession targets. They draft Tyler Warren. Do I think he's a world beater? I think he has trouble separating. I think there's an athleticism issue, but he's going to be involved. They spent heavy draft capital on him. So I think that Pittman is going to lose some of those short and intermediate targets to Tyler Warren, because who have they had a tight end in the past? They got about 7 names, but that means you have none. Now they actually have somebody who's going to be a possession receiver. And so I think Pittman is going to get a target squeeze from that, but neither of those players intersect with what Josh Downs does. And we've seen the coaching staff has really weaponized Downs, and that's not going to change.
Yeah, and I think that the Warren thing is really interesting when you consider his injection into this passing game, the one thing that wasn't there last year that's going to be there this year. And that's probably going to take away more from Pittman than Downs. I mean, you consider Pittman and Downs are going to the same spot. Maybe Downs is the correct play over Pittman there. Let's get into some other targets and fades. And I have peppered in through this list here. We'll try to get through these as many as possible. Some I'm going to take out because we've already talked about them. Nico Collins right now is a player that is going in the first round. No, he can't be going in the first round. Second round, 203.
Second round, yeah.
203 right now in FFPC Big Gorilla Drafts, wide receiver 8, excuse me. When you look at what the Houston Texans did, they let Diggs go or whatever. But then they draft Jaden Higgins. They draft Jalen Noel. They also traded for Christian Kirk. Is this any kind of commentary on what they think about Collins? Is Collins still worth that early second round pick here this year with all this new influx of talent coming into CJ Stroud in Houston?
It's so difficult. I've loved Nico Collins his entire career, and I dealt with the first 2 years of the injuries and the moderate numbers, but I saw the promise, and we loved it in 2023 when he was affordable. He's not affordable anymore. And because look at the missed games. 5 last year, 2 the prior year, 7 the prior, and as a rookie, he missed 3. He always misses like significant time for a receiver. So now I got to plan for that because this is a 4-year sample. This is not just like, 2 out of 4 years. Good luck. Good luck. That's not really the case. So now I'm paying second round price for a player I'm expecting like with James Conner durability. That's an issue. But his targets have not been through the roof either. Now he's super efficient and he makes all these big plays. He only had in that breakout season 109 targets in 15 games. That's not like elite alpha targeting. That's not the 10 a game. He's not going to get you 140 targets. Now, can he continue to make the big plays? He can, but now he's going to miss time. And like you said, there might be maybe the targets go down a slight bit. So again, love Nico Collins. But at that price, I just don't think it's a good price for him.
So that and Bill Hollywood is chiming in on YouTube right now, and he wants to know, and I think this is a slam dunk. I know how I feel about it. Nico Collins versus Drake London. London, who is going essentially 3 picks on average after Collins. He is the next wide receiver after Collins. I'd rather have London than Collins this year. It sounds like you would too.
Oh, all day long. Like I said, I am aggressively drafting London. I'll put him in a spot in my rankings that doesn't make it look foolish, but I really think there's a great chance he finishes the wide receiver 5 if it just goes normal, and he can get higher than that. So, yeah, I'm in on Drake London as much as I could get him.
Corey Walters also chimed in on YouTube. Is Nico Collins like T. Higgins when we talk about the fragility of him? How comparable are those two players?
There's one difference, and it's a major difference. T. Higgins, by the way, is going at wide receiver 12. He doesn't have an 1,100-yard season. He doesn't have a 110 target season, and 5 missed games 2 years in a row, a couple goose eggs because of pregame, early game injuries. So they're like each other, yes, but at least Collins has that 1,297 on 8 season, whereas T. Higgins has never had that. And people are paying for him for what he's never done in 5 years with Joe Burrow.
This is great because T. Higgins, I was going to ask you about, you're out on him. Now I got him at wide receiver 14 in the big gorilla right now at the 304. You'd be much more likely to choose Harrison, McLaurin, Rashee Rice, players like that over Higgins.
Well, it's funny. Every spot makes a difference. Wide receiver 12 has been, and I think Darren has us up as his ADP overall. I checked it yesterday. It was wide receiver 12. Now, when you're talking wide receiver 14, I'm probably more likely to go with a running back at that point over Higgins. I don't see. This is what I said last year, and I've been a T. Higgins guy. I love T. Higgins, but I said last year, going into the year, the durability. I can't count on him. And last year, the price wasn't this prohibitive. And sure, he was great when he was on the field, but he missed 5 games. I'm not winning my fantasy league most likely, and he had a few good games late, but it just was not worth even that ADP. Now I got to pay even wide receiver 14. Just give me a running back. Give me somebody who's less risky. They could all get hurt, but he is proven to be a bad bet.
Aaron Glenn, the head coach of the New York Jets, said his objective this year that he wants to get Garrett Wilson the ball as much as possible, which I think is interesting because we've never heard, at least I don't remember hearing this from a Jets head coach or an offensive coordinator before that. And yet Garrett Wilson has put up some really, really good fantasy seasons for us, Jim. And I think we don't think about that because we're expecting so much more from Garrett Wilson. And that's on us. That's not on Wilson. He's put up 1,000-yard receiving yard seasons. It's been great for him. And now we hear a resounding emphasis on getting him the ball from his head coach. And yet Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 12 at the 301, behind A.J. Brown, Ladd McConkey, Drake London. I kind of like Garrett Wilson this year, and I think people are sleeping on him based on not what he did in previous seasons, but what he didn't do compared to high-stakes fantasy football players' expectations, and that's why I like him at that 2-3 turn.
You're right, Balk. He was commonly going as a wide receiver 8, wide receiver 10, and he was missing that. That makes him a disappointment in the community. But the targets, this is funny, though, that Aaron Glenn says that because this is a player who has between 147 and 168 targets each of his 3 seasons. Mm-hmm. So how many more can you really get? All right, maybe you get to 175, but, you're not talking CeeDee Lamb 191 or 2 years ago range, but maybe he gets there, right? But what I'll say is this, and this is why I'm excited. I know Justin Fields is a limited quarterback. I know he can't read the entire field, but I know he played with DJ Moore 2 years ago. And I know that DJ Moore had 136 targets And DJ Moore had 1,364 yards and 8 touchdowns. And some of those were Tyson Bagent games. And so really, DJ Moore was even a little better than that. And it's a similar situation. And I really think Justin Fields is going to be able to make this work. And I think Garrett Wilson with those targets is going to be able to make some things happen. And I'm with you. I think that he is fantastic value in any draft.
So the other thing I want to bring up here is a sophomore wide receiver. And we talked about Malik Nabers. We've talked about Brian Thomas. We have not talked about the number one wide receiver, at least drafted last year. And that was Marvin Harrison, a guy who failed to connect with Kyler Murray for the majority of the season in 2024. We'll see what happens this year. I have heard a lot of narratives. I've heard a lot of explanations on why Murray could not connect with Harrison. I just look at the ADP disparity. This is a guy that was like an early second-round pick as a rookie. In KFFSC drafts where you have to start 3 wide receivers, this is a player that was sometimes going at the back end of the first round. In fact, I even took him at like the 201 or the 202 in a couple of drafts. And maybe that's on me. Maybe I overdrafted him. But I look at him now, wide receiver 16, again, FFPC tight end premium drafts. He has fallen to the 309. This is Tyreek Hill, Terry McLaurin neighborhood. Are you betting on a bounce back for Harrison? I know he's bulked up. I know he's trying to get it done. He does not seem like a diva wide receiver to me. This is a guy that puts his head down and just grinds. And I feel like people are letting him slip too far in drafts right now. I've drafted him as my number 2 receiver, sometimes my number 3 in a couple of drafts. And I feel pretty good about it. Should I feel pretty good about that this year, Jim?
If the leap of faith that I'm going to get to connect, you will hit big. But here's what the issue I see. Why did Marvin Harrison have a disappointing rookie season per our standards? It was average depth of target. 82nd percentile. He saw so many go routes. Those are the lowest percentage pass plays in the game. And that's why he only caught 53% of the targets that went his way. So that was a problem. They were not getting in the ball in space and creating yards after the catch, which is really something that he could have excelled in. Here's my problem, Balky. They had a bye in week 11. They had every opportunity as a coaching staff to say, what's wrong here? What can we fix? They didn't. We saw one game. No, we did with no games over 60 yards until week 17 after that bye. That tells me, why do I believe the Arizona coaching staff is going to do anything different this year? If they had a bye week to fix it late in the season and they made no attempt to shorten his depth of target. I should say they made some attempts, but it just didn't work. There were some shorter passes, but they were still going way too deep. So they're going to have to revolutionize how they use him. They're going to have to make him they use him like a stretch Z receiver downfield. He's an X receiver, and they didn't use him that way. So if your leap of faith works and they choose to treat him like a true chess piece in the offense, he crushes for you.
Does the round and a half, potentially 2 rounds, depending upon the draft, ADP discount from 2024 to 2025, does that affect you at all? Or are you just kind of like, no, I mean, he wasn't getting it done to return first, second round value. I don't see enough to say that he's going to return 3rd round value this year.
I mean, like I said, his last 7 games after that bye, when they could have done something, he had 1 game over 63 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. So is he a good fit with Kyler Murray the way they're using him? Again, I hope that your bet on him works because I hope they use him correctly. And it's in the range because it's pretty obvious to some people, but it's clearly not obvious to the Arizona coaching staff. But it could happen. In the offseason, they may have really sat down and said, what did we do? And if they did that, I think you have a screaming value. But it's going to be a leap of faith because there's nothing we saw last year that tells us they figured it out.
Leading up into the NFL draft, we heard rumblings that Teteroa McMillan could be the Robin to Marvin Harrison's Batman, or maybe vice versa in Arizona. That didn't happen because Carolina traded up to get him, and now he is the number 1 unquestioned alpha for the Carolina Panthers passing offense and Bryce Young in Carolina. With the Panthers right now, McMillan is wide receiver 23 at the 504. going behind Worthy, Evans, DJ Moore, going right ahead of Metcalf and Devonta Smith. Does Tet McMillan represent more of a target for you at that early to mid 5th round price, or is he more of a fade for you in redraft leagues like the FFPC Big Gorilla?
I'm fading Bryce Young, which is why I'm fading Tet McMillan. Nothing to do with Tet McMillan. He's a very talented player. For fantasy, Bryce Young was nice down the stretch. We saw 20-point games. We saw a 39-point game. He was running the ball. That's what got it. Scored some rushing touchdowns. Here's the passing yardage in the last 5 games for Bryce Young. 191, 219, 158, 203. And then that crazy game against Atlanta where I think they both scored 40 points. He did throw for 251 in a game that was 75 points.
Right.
Bryce Young is going to throw for 200 yards a game. And maybe Tet McMillan is loaded up with so many targets. I don't think that Adam Thielen is going away. I think he's still going to get targets because he has a clear chemistry with his quarterback, and they're going to have to get some passes to Xavier Legette for a quarterback.
Jalen Coker as well, right?
Coker, yes.
Yeah.
Coker plays a lot of big slot, and so we'll see how when Thielen was back, Coker kind of faded out because Coker's a big slot. So the problem is where he fits, right? So in 3 receiver sets, you would think it's going to be Thielen, Legette, a big ball winner on the outside, and then he's like the Z receiver possession. But then you have Tet McMillan as the X. So Coker is kind of like a man without a country, unless or when Adam Thielen misses time. Then he jumps in. But you're right. So I think that's the issue. There's not passing yardage there. And it wasn't like it was a crazy schedule. Bryce Young down the stretch. Tampa 30th against the pass, Dallas 32nd, Arizona 15th. And those are those low yardage games that we saw. So I can't buy in on Bryce Young. And I still think defense, this is my last thing I'll say. I'm sorry I'm talking too long.
It's okay.
I felt last year defenses treated Bryce Young like a bye week. I'm sure because they knew what he was before. I'm sure they just didn't worry all week long. I'm sure they showed up on Sunday and said, I call it the subliminal switch. Anybody who played sports, if you knew you were better than the other team, you always wondered why you didn't crush them all the time. The subliminal switch, you didn't take them seriously. You talked it up all week. They're dangerous. They're dangerous. No, they're not. I don't think anybody took Bryce Young seriously. If teams take him seriously, he doesn't have the arm strength to do much of anything, I think.
I want to tackle 2 more wide receiver situations. I want to start in Baltimore here. Zay Flowers, who I think you're down on, and we'll get your thoughts on him. Wide receiver 29 at the 603. And then we were talking about these threads and the stat of the day that you do for RotoWire and, of course, on X at Jim Coventry NFL. One of them that you did with Rashad Bateman somewhat recently. So Flowers, I said already, wide receiver 29, 603. Bateman, wide receiver 63 at the 1407. I am going to go on a limb and say Jim Coventry is much more likely to take Bateman at that price than Zay Flowers. Am I right?
I definitely am. That's an accurate statement. Now, I'll notice when Darren Armani runs the ADP on Zay Flowers, you're going to notice the first month of the offseason, he was 23 receiver. Then he was 24 before the draft, 25 right after the draft. He's 28 now. So Zay Flowers has seen a little bit of a creep back every month, which I think is interesting. Here's what I want you to know about Zay Flowers. You know he's talented. I think he's an excellent football player. He had 1,059 yards last year. Very solid. Here's what you need to know about Zay Flowers. The first 9 games, in 5 of those, he went over 18.5 PPR points, and he looked good. But the Ravens had 2 iterations of their run game change last year. In week 3, they decided to go to 2 tight ends. They got Patrick Ricard on the field a little more, and then Henry started running better. Bulky, week 11. Lamar goes into the shotgun. All of a sudden now, Derrick Henry's running out of the gun, but when defense are running at Henry, Lamar's pocketing the ball. Well, what happened to Zay Flowers? Zay Flowers, after the first 9 games, when he had 5 18.5-point games, he had 1 12-point game the rest of the season.
Wow.
Why? Because this is a run-based team now. They have their identity. That is not changing. It's Lamar running, it's Derrick Henry running, and there's scraps for everybody else. Mark Andrews had a great season. Very few targets, 20% touchdown rate. But everybody is living on a few targets because they don't have to throw the ball.
That's interesting. Very interesting. And when you're soaking a a pick in Rashad Bateman in whatever I said, the 14th round, it makes a lot more sense than being wide receiver 28, wide receiver 29 for Zay Flowers. Last thing I want to talk about is my Packers here. Jayden Reed, the report was that he orchestrated a sit-down meeting with Brian Gutekunst, the head coach, or excuse me, the GM of the Green Bay Packers, after the Packers utilized a first-round pick and a third-round pick on Matthew Golden and Savion Williams, respectively. Gutekunst said those picks do not challenge or change the fact that he is the number one pass catcher for the Packers. Jayden Reed had an opportunity to talk to the Green Bay media yesterday about this. And I thought it was kind of enlightening that, to me, when I heard him talk about this was not something he wanted to do. He hired Drew Rosenhaus as his new agent in the offseason. This makes it seem like this was a Rosenhaus thing that Reed just happened to be present for, but it wasn't something that he wanted. And Reed, I think, and I believe this, had he not had his shoulder injury at the end of last season, which, by the way, he said dislocated shoulder, torn labrum, no surgery required, but it took him between 4 and 5 months to rehab and get that shoulder right for this season. That's significant. And I think the reason the Packers aren't using him was because he was so messed up with that shoulder at the end of last season. So when I look at Reed versus Golden here, the first Packers receiver Green Bay has taken in the first round in 23 years, they are back-to-back right now. Wide receiver 45, wide receiver 46, Reed and Golden. Reed at the 903, Golden at the 907. Jim, where do you weigh in on which Packers receiver is the correct one to own more of this year?
It's interesting how you bring up the Jayden Reed shoulder injury, because like through week 7, there were 4 games he had over 70% of the snaps. And then if you notice, after the week 10 bye, he had 1 game that just scraped 70. So his playing time definitely was on the downswing. The problem was, though, even in the first half of the season when he was getting those games, he had a couple games in the 50% target range. So usage has still been an issue. I don't know how you play a player 62% of the time. Now, again, take the injury out, and we're probably talking 67. He still isn't on the field enough. Right. All that said, this became a power running team in the second half of the season. Why? I believe that mirage we saw late in 2023 where Jordan Love looked great, I think Cinderella turned into a little bit of a pumpkin. I think he's a good quarterback. I don't think he can carry a team. And I think the coaching staff figured it out. And Matt LaFleur then went to a power running game, and now we pass situationally off of that. Jayden Reed would be part of the solution because you could use him in motion. You could use him on a lot of different plays. His snap share needs to go up. I would prefer him over Matthew Golden, though, because what's the worst thing that Jordan Love does? Downfield passing. Yeah. So Golden is more than a deep threat, but he's not a better intermediate threat than Jayden Reed. He's not a better short area than either Romeo Doubs. Savion Williams could take his job. Well, that's another story for another day. So I think Jayden Reed is a much better fit for the offense. ADP's a little bit higher, but I think the floor is higher in the ceiling. I think Matthew Golden's in a bad spot. I don't think he is going to fit with his quarterback. And again, on a run-based team, I just don't see his role.
I'm going to say this right now regarding the Packers offense, and I think it's based on a lot of what you've been saying. The Packers went out after becoming a power running team last year, and went out and signed Aaron Banks off the Niners, who is one of the heaviest, I think the heaviest guards in the league, and probably the heaviest Packers offensive lineman. He's slated to start at left guard this year. They're moving Elton Jenkins to center. Mm-hmm. What did they do in the draft? The second round, Jim, Anthony Belton, offensive tackle out of NC State, 6'6", 335, another road grader. So if you think this Packers power running game was just out of necessity because Love gets his knee screwed up in that Eagles game in week 1, hey, maybe there's something to that. But look at what the Packers are doing. Like this could be another power. And you have basically a redshirt season for Marshawn Lloyd last year. He's going to be coming back fresh this year. So I think there's a lot to take into account. I didn't like the Matthew Golden pick for fantasy. I didn't like it for the Packers as well. Now, maybe that'll pay off down the road, but down the road is not in 2025. So I am like lock and step with you right now on this. Okay, I want to take another quick break. We've talked a lot of receivers. We have yet to get to the running back report. We're going to do that when we come back. Remember, the FFPC main event live draft start this Saturday. Slow draft's already off and running. If you like what Jim and I are saying, or if you want to go counterintuitive to it, draft now in FFPC main event slow drafts. You're going to get $200 off your first team. You're going to be entered in the FFPC Pros versus Joe's drawing, where you can compete for a 2026 FFPC main event entry against guys like Jim coming up in late July. In August, we'll have those drafts not only in the HSFF Hour, we'll have them on the Better Sports Network as well. We're going to be coming up to talk about the running back report. Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs, Bucky Irving, Rashad White, the Buccaneers running backs. We'll get into all that and more. He's Jim Coventry, SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and RotoWire. I'm Eric Balkman. Don't go anywhere. The FFPC Insider Access Show rolls on right after this.
Guys, Andrew Cooper here, Fantasy Alarm, and boy, do I have great news for you. It's that time of year. The FFPC main event is open. The flagship contest, in my opinion, the biggest number one contest in all of fantasy football. It's not just about the prizes. You can win $1 million, but if you win a contest like this, you are gold-plated, gold-stamped in this community. That puts respect on your name when you go in there with the big dogs and you win a tournament like this. So get set up with my FFPC now. When you use promo code ALARM, they'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more if you've never drafted there before. And you can get in there with the big dogs. If you really want, you can actually go to Vegas and draft at the Paris Casino live in these contests. You don't have to do that, though. You can draft online. They have 6-hour, 2-hour, and 60-second clocks, depending on what you're feeling. And if you sign up now before May 31st, my birthday, you get a discount. You can get $200 off your first team, and every team subsequent after that, $600 off. You're going to want to draft early and often these to give yourself the best possible shot at winning. And let me tell you, when you go over to your social media bio and you throw FFPC main event champion in there, people start thinking about you at a different way. You are now an absolute champion and legend in this community if you win the FFPC main event. Open now over at myffpc.com.
This is the main event draft season.
A main event team on FFPC $2,000 entry team. Grand prize of $1 million.
I'm looking for that $1 million top prize.
Main event season is in full swing.
Join the FFPC main event today. Save $200 off your first team when you register by midnight Pacific time on Saturday at myffpc.com. That's myffpc.com. You'll be entered into the FFPC Pros versus Joe's drawing, and joining, if you get selected, 41 other Joes taking on 42 industry pros for the right to win a 2026 FFPC main event team. 7 of those will be given away. We'll broadcast those drafts live on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. We'll simulcast them. I believe we're going to simulcast them. If not, we'll put them up for on-demand viewing on the Better Sports Network as well. So that's coming up at the end of July. But remember, get in now before midnight Pacific time on Saturday. The guest we have tonight is Jim Coventry, at Jim Coventry NFL on the X. You hear him on SiriusXM Fantasy Football, or SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio for the Fantasy Football Show. Jim, who do you do that show with again?
So on the weekends with Mario Puig and then also Alan Soslowski. I switch up one day with each. And then I sub in during the weeks on occasion too.
Does Soslowski ever get kind of blue with you? I mean, like, I feel like he co-hosted the show a couple weeks ago, and sometimes I feel like I got to rein him in a little bit. I know I had the pedophile analogy earlier, but sometimes I think like he goes even a step further from that.
You know, Alan Soslowski, I tell you what his superpower is. Being the host of a show. He is the maestro. Like when he's on a show with me, it's like he always knows the right questions to change to and ask. I tell you what, he really sets it up on the radio like none other. That's a superpower.
He is a joy to work with, no question. I love listening to him. Just like you, I love listening to you guys because you know ball and you make it entertaining, which is great. Let's get into the running back report here. One of the more polarizing players seemingly for his entire career, and it continues in 2025, Christian McCaffrey. who currently has an ADP of running back 5 at the 112. It has been climbing. A couple of weeks ago, Jim, you could get him in the FFPC Big Gorilla if you're drafting for $1 million at myffpc.com. You get him in the mid, maybe even late the second round. He's climbed up to the end of the first. That a good price for him? How do you feel about him at that spot?
Look, you want to take down a big prize? The last 4 seasons, McCaffrey has been healthy. He has been either the running back 1, and in the bad years, the running back 2. Nobody in the NFL has that resume. Of course, the downside, 3 of the last 5 years he's missed time. And when McCaffrey misses time, he does it splendidly. He misses at least a half a season, if not more.
Yeah.
Last year, I'm going to say this. It wasn't a football-related injury. It wasn't an Achilles tear. And then he came back and hurt the knee. I'm sure there was, him not conditioned probably to his level. So 2 of the last 3 years, though, he's played a full set of snaps and a full set of games. I'm willing to bet on that. He's still 29. Bulky in terms of workload, he's only averaged 168 carries per year. Some of that was because of the injuries and the missed time, but he doesn't have as much tread as we think he does on his tires. And being still 29, knowing that Kyle Shanahan is going to get everything he can out of him, and that 49ers defense, they keep every year, they lose infrastructure on that defense. This team's going to have to score. McCaffrey's the answer. So look, if you want to swing for that big prize, why not McCaffrey?
All right, so let's say you do go with McCaffrey at that 112 pick or 201 or 202, whatever. Is it the right move to then handcuff him later on? And I'll get into this here in a second. Number one, I want to get your philosophy on handcuffing your own guys in a national tournament like the FFPC main event, like the FFPC Big Gorilla. Number two, if you do believe in that, are you taking Isaac Guerrero at running back 43 at the 10-11? Are you skipping him and taking Jordan James, running back 70 at the 16-12? Or are you just not drafting his backup at all and drafting somebody else's backup? Jim, how do you feel about that?
The history of the Shanahan backfield tells you the number 3 guy is more valuable than the number 2.
That's true, yeah.
And it has happened too many times. All in Elijah Mitchell. Guess what? No Elijah Mitchell. And I know that's voodoo, and I get it. The running back 70, I will back him up with Jordan James. Look, Guerrero last year, he had his shot and he missed some time.
Yeah.
And I believe he got hurt in week 18, a serious injury. So he would have missed time had that been earlier in the season. So the limited time he played 3 games, but in that span, he missed 1 and the other, he was out in 4 snaps. So he played in 60% of his opportunities. So not the model of durability. So yeah, I would bet on Jordan James, but I can't take a running back 43, 44 flyer on Guerrero, not seeing any consistent model of health out of him with limited work.
So knowing that, would you be more likely to take somebody other than the Niners backup, or would you still be taking Jordan James?
Yeah, overall, I don't really want the handcuff unless I know it's like Ray Davis for James Cook, because I know that Ty Johnson's role staying what it is, but basically Ray Davis taking that role. So in that case, yeah, handcuff. But otherwise, I'd rather have Ray Davis if I didn't have Cook, because I want, if another team's player gets hurt, all of a sudden I have a gold mine. I have an extra running back on my team. So I like taking other people's backup running backs instead of my own and leverage that. Look, we're playing for a tournament and we have a ton of great teams in there. But now if I have an extra starting running back, my one that I drafted who stayed healthy, and now somebody else's backup because their starter got healthy, all of a sudden I have a massive advantage come playoff time.
You do. You absolutely do. Massive advantages were created by Bucky Irving in drafts last year. There was not a whole lot of people that believed in him being a difference maker based on his final ADP in the FFPC main event, the Fantasy Pros Championship last year as well. If we look at Tampa Bay running backs this year, and you and Theo, I think, had a pretty good discussion on this. Bucky Irving, running back 10 at the 210. Rachaad White, running back 46 at the 1109. I'm going to try to set you up for this. The environment that Bucky Irving was playing in last year could be radically different in Tampa in 2025 than it was a season before. How do you fall in on Irving versus White this year, knowing that?
I know the coach is gone. Liam Cohen's not there. I understand it. Josh Grizzard's taking over. I still can't get out of my mind the last 3 games, including the playoff game, Rashad White was cut down to 20 snaps a game, but worse, a total of 7 carries and a total of 3 targets in 3 games. He was phased out of the offense almost completely. Sean Tucker had more touches, less snaps, more touches in those 3 games. And that was one of them, this was money time for them. Rashad White's a nice receiver. Did Bucky Irving get the extended role late because they were in win mode? Or was it that he was so much better than Rashad White that he just so far surpassed him? White was kind of a non-factor. I tend to think that. I think White is one of those guys. Remember Alexander Madison a few years ago? He'd step in for James Cook for Dalvin Cook, and he would do really well. And then kind of when he went off on his own, well, all of a sudden, we'll kind of see what we got here. I think Rashad White's a good football player, but I think he's kind of more on that Alexander Madison track where you can get easily passed up. I am betting. I don't like Bucky Irving's ADP. I don't like it because you kind of intimated this. It was a perfect storm last year. Baker threw 41 touchdowns. This offense was humming. Cohen had something to do with that. Something to do with that. I don't know how much. And they could run a lot of that back. The offensive line's still good. They still have the weapons. But somehow somebody's play calling, setting it up, gets that peak level offense. This offense could drop by 20%. And maybe Irving would be the biggest loser in that. I'm worried about it. I don't dislike him at his ADP, but I'm not like wheels up because I think you're drafting him at probably his ceiling.
Yeah. And that's why I don't like him at his ADP.
No.
Here's where I fall in on this. I should look it up and I don't have it. And I'm not going to look it up because it's bad. It'd be too much of a delay and it wouldn't be good. Here's what I know. Bucky Irving was kind of a semi-quasi like flyer in rookie drafts last year. Then when it got to redraft season, we're kind of like, yeah, I'll take a chance on this guy. I mean, Rashad White was still the guy at that point. We knew Sean Tucker was in existence, but nobody was drafting Bucky Irving based on like, oh yeah, this is going to be the guy this year. He turned out to be the guy. And he turned out to be the guy on an organization that had Liam Cohen as the OC, Chris Godwin as one of the significant contributors at wide receiver, and that did not have Emeka Egbuka. Flash forward to 2025. Now Bucky Irving is going in the 2nd round. Okay? Now Chris Godwin is seemingly, at least we think, healthy. And now Emeka Egbuka, one of the most pro-ready receivers we've seen not only in 2025, but in recent memory, is now there. And you still have Jalen McMillan, and you still have Mike Evans there as well. I just feel like you're playing with fire drafting Bucky Irving at the end of the 2nd round. That's why I don't like him there. Now, I could be wrong. And obviously, I always lay out the possibility that I'm wrong. Right. But for me, when you look at, and I'll bring up the ADP on Mojo here right now. If I'm looking at a running back at the 210 right now, Josh Jacobs looks insightful. Chase Brown, a team that did almost nothing to address their defense in the draft and free agency and may not have Trey Hendrickson, depending upon how that turns out. Chase Brown could be huge. Kyron Williams, who we want to bury every single year in fantasy football. And now they're trying to work out an extension for him, even after drafting Jarquez Williams. Right, Jarquez Williams, Jarquez Hunter, excuse me. Even after drafting Jarquez Hunter in the 4th round this year, and then Blake Corum in the 3rd round last year, like that could be the play. Breece Hall, who everybody hates on because of Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen right now, and how they used him last year, he could be the play. So I'm not saying that any one of those 3 guys are the right guy to draft over Bucky Irving, but I definitely can tell myself a pretty solid story that they are. So I'm out on Bucky Irving at running back 10 at the 210. Okay, we went from Florida, or we're going to go from Florida all the way to California. The disparity in Chargers running backs right now, I think, is worth talking about. We have Omarion Hampton in the FFPC Big Gorilla, Jim Coventry, going right now at the running back 15 at the 405. The guy that the Chargers signed in free agency prior to drafting Hampton is Najee Harris, running back 35, 20 running back spots lower at the 904. He is going 5 rounds later. Listen, I love me some Hampton, and I understand the hate on Harris, He's been consistent. He's never been a world beater. But, man, at that point, I mean, there was one best ball draft I was in a couple of weeks ago where I waited, and I already had 3 running backs, and Najee Harris was still out there. I can't remember what round it was, like something like round 10, or it was something just sick. I'm like, all right, I'm taking him at this point. Is the disparity correct for you? Should Omari and Hampton be going 5 rounds ahead of Najee Harris? Which one are you more likely to draft? Hampton in the mid-4th, Harris in the mid-9th.
The fact that they paid Najee Harris starter money, it was a 1-year deal. It was like $9.35 million starter money. They clearly, and they signed him quickly, they clearly saw something that they thought in him. Remember, Greg Roman is about the power running game. And, they're going to put an extra tight end or a fullback on the field. They are going to load it up to run the ball. And then offensive line, they built up the offensive interior a little bit. Take a bunch of shots. Something should work there. Mekhi Becton, I think, is in the mix there. Did well last year at guard for the Eagles. I think they're going to run as much as they can. And I think both are going to get work. Harris, to me, is a good value there because he's going to play. And I don't know that Hampton is going to get 70% of the work. And if he's not getting 70% of the work and you're drafting him as running back 15, the math doesn't really work out there. And the defense isn't great. They overachieved a little bit early last year, but they kind of got exposed late. And I really don't think that there's much of a talent influx. So I think that this defense is going to have some games where they got to pass more. So I think the way it all works out, I don't like Hampton's ADP, but I definitely can get behind Harris as a running back 3.
I don't want to predict injuries on this show, but I do know running backs get hurt. That's just a fact of life. When you couple the fact that Hampton could be the lead running back, could be seeing more touches than not, never seen NFL action before, and then he goes down for 3 weeks or 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever, and you're getting Najee Harris behind that line on that Greg Roman offense for a window of a month, or even, that could be the difference between you making the playoffs or not making the playoffs, or winning your Big Gorilla main event league or not winning your. You're talking about a player who's proven, like, he doesn't miss games. You want him to get 1 yard, he gets 3 yards. You want him to get 3 yards, he gets 3 yards. You want him to get 6 yards, he gets 3 yards. He's super consistent. He's out on the field. I don't love it. It's not a sexy pick, but I'm not willing to pay for Hampton right now. I'm willing to pay for Harris because it is a super, super cheap price.
Balky, this is off topic, but bear with me a minute. I have an article I'm dropping in July.
On RotoWire.com?
On RotoWire.com. And this is my big one. This article, I try to think things through that I see that nobody really else sees coming. Running backs didn't get hurt last year for the most part. You had a few injuries, but you had all these players that are always hurt, not getting hurt. And I'm thinking, all right, the first thing we all say is anomaly, and anomalies happen. I'm like, I can't buy it till I study more. And now I started figuring things out because I watch all these games. Mm-hmm. The linebackers in football have gotten lighter and lighter and lighter over the years. We now have an average linebacker that you're looking like maybe 235. It used to be like 250. So you don't have thumpers on it. You have small guys that can run and cover. The other thing is, Balky, last year, more than ever, the base defense was 2 linebackers on the field. It used to be 3 and 4. Put this combination together. You have smaller defenders. You have less of them. Theoretically, with the tight end, you could get a hat on every potential guy trying to stop the run. The running backs, when I thought back, were not taking the kill shots. They weren't even taking big hits because defenses were playing the pass. And that can't change. The weights of the linebackers are what they are. Teams are going to keep trying to defend the pass. There will be guys that have hamstring pulls or guys that will sprain ankles, but the hip drop tackle was also taken out last year, which could help. I think because of the way the league's defenses have changed, I believe running back injuries, again, nobody's going to be perfect. That's going to go and stay way down. That's my theory.
I would love to poke holes in it.
Yeah, go ahead.
But the way you presented it, it makes perfect sense to me. And by the way, Armani would be a better guy to talk to about this. But just looking at Big Gorilla and main event draft boards, I feel like FFPC players are ahead of the curve, and they're already like kind of pushing running backs up a little bit more this year than they had in years past. And maybe there's something to that. And maybe maybe 2024 we'll look back and say, yeah, this is when things changed. It was not necessarily an anomaly. And I'm not willing to say that right now, but the way that you presented it, listen, you're trying to get an edge to win $1 million in the Big Gorilla or the FFPC main event. Like, this is your edge right here. Knowing what Jim Coventry just said about opposing defenses, maybe running back is your ticket. And you could start 4 of them in the FFPC in the main event in Big Gorilla too. So that's something to be aware of. Let's go to the NFC North. We're going to talk about David Montgomery here. You and Theo talked about this quite a bit on Fantasy Football Daily and Fantasy Points. Big year for Montgomery this year, scoring touchdowns, running the football. We kind of alluded to this with John Morton being the new OC in the first segment of the show tonight. I feel like your wheels up on David Montgomery, who, by the way, right now in the FFPC Big Gorilla, according to Darren Armani's FantasyMojo.com, running back 24 at the 604. Weird to be drafting a backup running back as a running back too, but Montgomery seems well worth it. I'm on board.
The question that fantasy managers have to answer, and we won't know, is this. Jahmyr Gibbs was a monster in the 3 games and then the playoff game. Montgomery was back for the playoff game, but played limited. Monster. The question is, can they put the genie back in the bottle? But I think they won't. And I'm like Montgomery because there's one thing. It's like James Conner. It's like the heart and soul of the team. And I believe that David Montgomery is one of those heart and soul of the team. And I believe him being on the field with Dan Campbell as the head coach, I don't think there's a world. They paid Montgomery pretty well, too, to keep him around a while. I don't think the genie goes back in the bottle. I think they played the same role they have. They realized they lost last year because of defensive injuries, not because of anything they did on offense. I believe that these two maintain their role. And remember, Balky, you don't just have Montgomery. Again, shortened season last year, but he still got to that double-digit touchdown mark. But remember, he also had 12 last year. He had 13 the prior year. The year before that, Jamal Williams, what did he have? 17, 18, something like that? So this big back position in Detroit has been money for touchdowns, even yardage. So, yeah, I'm in on Montgomery.
Montgomery is a guy that I've already been drafting in a few spots, and then I just think about, what happens if Gibbs misses time? Like Theo was talking about this too, and I mentioned this, I think it was this show last week. Theo was talking about this a few months ago. He's like, people are going to remember how Gibbs just crushed it for him down the regular season, forgetting that Montgomery was hurt. And he said, like, Gibbs is probably going to go as the 101 in a few drafts. And I don't know if I've seen that yet. It may have happened, but it wouldn't surprise me if I do. And that just, to me, suggests everybody's forgetting about Montgomery and they're sleeping on him. Aaron Jones saw a record high in touches, career high, I should say, in touches last year with Minnesota. Never saw that in Green Bay. Obviously, the Packers medical staff among the most conservative in the league. They wanted to keep him healthy. They wanted to keep him on the field. And Aaron Jones was not subjected to that type of treatment in 2024. And yet he still was awesome. And he was on the field a ton for Minnesota and turned it into a fantastic fantasy season. He is going behind David Montgomery and Caleb Johnson right now. He's going ahead of DeAndre Swift and Tony Pollard, running back 26. Now, is this fool's gold? It strikes me as too good to be true to get Aaron Jones at the 6'11 right now, Jim, as running back 26. And sometimes when it's too good to be true, I just stay away from it. But should I be staying away from it? Because that looks really, really juicy for Jones, knowing that the Vikings are going to want to incorporate him as much as possible to take pressure off J.J. McCarthy.
It's a tough call because I've always been in on Aaron Jones, no matter when his ADP is high. Last year, it was beautiful, cashed in real well there. There were a couple warning signs last year. And also, he's going to end of the season, he'll be 31. So he's well over 30 and a half right now. There's that. But what I noticed in the second half of last season were a little concerns. We saw his efficiency drop in the second half of the season. Last 4 games, he was down to 3.9 yards per carry. You kind of saw, and he had like at least 88 rushing yards 6 times in the first 11 games. And then he only hit 73 once more the rest of the way. Now, PPR, he was catching some passes, so that certainly helped him out. But remember, Jordan Mason's there. And Aaron Jones, he only had 5 rushing touchdowns last year, but he fumbled 5 times. They lost 3 of them. So Jordan Mason's going to have a role. And Kevin O'Connell had already said they've kind of got like 2 number 1 running backs. And I think Mason's going to be heavily involved. I think Jones is going to morph into more of a receiving back. maybe secondary and the grinder carries. They really worked on an offensive line. They bring in Ryan Kelly. They bring in Will Freeze, 2 guards. They drafted, I believe, first round another guard, and their tackles are really good. So, like you said, though, you are correct. What they're proving here is J.J. McCarthy, I don't know if they can trust him. They're going to run. This is going to be a very good running team. Justin Jefferson is going to get his. We talked earlier, Hawkins is going to be the loser there, I think. It's tough on Jones. It's borderline because that slippage I saw in the second half, that looked like an older back.
So I want to go rapid fire. We have a few minutes left in the show.
Yes.
I think we can get to all these guys, which I think is going to be fun. Cam Scadaboo versus Tyrone Tracy. Scadaboo has somewhat separated himself in the FFPC Big Gorilla ADP right now. Over the last 7 days, he's running back 30. Tracy has fallen to running back 36. About a round separates these guys. 804 versus 905. Scadaboo is the pick by FFPC players right now. Jim, do you agree with that?
I agree. Quick reasoning is this. We saw the workload get cut down after the bye for Tracy. They cut him down 10 or less carries forward the last 7. His yards per carry went to 3.5. Yeah, I think they know what he is, and Scadaboo is the guy of their future and present.
Okay, so running back 30, let's throw Giants running backs out the door. Like running back 30, a starting running back there, you're all over, regardless of the team.
100%.
Okay. I want to move to Jacksonville here, and I feel like I'm going to be talking about this team a lot this summer, but I think it's worth doing. They invested that first-round pick into Travis Etienne. They got Tank Bigsby. Then they get a new GM, a new head coach in Gladstone and Cohen. And what do they do in this draft? They draft Bayshell Tootin, and they draft LaQuint Allen, which I'm not saying those are the 2 new Jacksonville running backs this year and for the future, but I'm not saying that they're not either. When you look at the ADP for these running backs for Jacksonville, none is being drafted high, which is great. So you can sprinkle in however you want to sprinkle in with these guys. Tootin running back 33, ETN 40, Bigsby 48, LaQuint Allen 77. Tootin and ETN ADP respectively 1001 and 1207. 901 and 1001. I was reading that wrong. 901 for Tootin, Travis Etienne 1001. Bigsby not going till 1208, and then, of course, LaQuint Allen super late at 1810. Where is the value in this Jacksonville backfield, knowing that we rarely see 4 running backs drafted in a 20-round draft, 12-team, 20-round draft? We're seeing 4 of them being drafted in Jacksonville. Who are you on, Jim?
I'm on Bigsby. He's only 213, but he's their only back I think could grind the ball a little bit. Tootin, no agility, super fast, but he has no agility. And how many running backs do you see every week busting 60-yard runs? That doesn't happen in the NFL. So Tootin, in theory, is nice. I don't think he fits. The team has already told us what they think about Travis Etienne. He's not their future. He's their past. And LaQuint Allen, 7th-round pick, I believe. Good luck, right? So Bigsby's my guy on this one.
Bigsby makes sense. He's cheap. You can get him at the end of the 12th round. Speaking of cheap, my God, the Dallas Cowboys running back situation for like the umpteenth straight year since Ezekiel Elliott went out to pasture. Javonte Williams, running back 38, Jayden Blue, running back 39, Miles Sanders, running back 81, Phil Maffa, running back 87. Let's focus on Williams and Blue since they're both going at the 9 and 10. Are you team Williams or are you team Blue this year, Jim?
It's so difficult because Williams could pass protect. I'm worried that Blue can't, and that's going to determine. If they want the pass protection, Williams will be their guy. If they don't care and they just want somebody in space for speed, it's going to be Blue. I'm fading the backfield because I don't know which way that's going.
So you're fading it entirely. You don't even want any part of it. Okay, that's fine.
No.
Yeah, makes sense. I don't like to talk about contracts this early in the year, but James Cook obviously skipping OTAs. He was hyper efficient last year. When in regards to touchdowns on a team that features Josh Allen, by the way, which is still more bizarre. Running back 14, 402 is where Cook is at. Ray Davis, running back 45 at the 1107. I don't know what to make of this. I don't know if the contract thing is going to play a role in this as well. But if you're drafting a big gorilla or a main event team this weekend, Jim, are you looking at Cook as a value? Are you looking at Ray Davis as a value? Are you just shunning the Buffalo Bills running back situation until you get more clarity as well? How are you handling it?
Cook saw 36 to 46% of the snaps 7 times in the last 9 games. Each year they scale his work down because he becomes less efficient the more work he gets. Like you said, the touchdowns were an outlier. 18 touchdowns in his first 33 games. What did he have? 10? If even that, I think it was less. outlier. The usage, I mean, the efficiency's gone down. So yeah, and in the complaining about money, I like Ray Davis. Cook is overpriced. He's not going to see enough work. I like Ray Davis late, and if Cook sits out or misses time, jackpot.
Jackpot anytime we get Jim Coventry on this show. You follow him on the X at Jim Coventry NFL, a fantasy football writer of the year finalist from the FSWA, a guy who does everything over at RotoWire. Think about the podcast, all the written work over at rotowire.com. At SiriusXM Fantasy is where you can follow SiriusXM Fantasy when Jim comes back in, about a month or so from now, roughly?
Early July.
Early July, perfect. And of course, Jim Coventry NFL on the X for everything that Jim is doing. My God, so much fun tonight, Jim. I always appreciate this time we have. Thank you so much for hanging out. We'll definitely do this again. Enjoy the rest of the drafting season. Maybe we'll talk with you when you're drafting your pros versus Joe's team, and you can pop on for make a couple of picks. We always appreciate that. Until then, thank you, sir. Kudos to you, and kudos again.